Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden, joined on, honestly, what feels like way too early of an afternoon.
I know.
Is Tori McElhaney. Tori,
yeah.
How was your night, your flight back? I don't even want to start with the game right now because, we'll get to it. But
yeah, I'm very tired. I think I got to my apartment at 5:30 in the morning.
There you go.
So probably was asleep by 5:45, 6 o'clock. You texted me at 11. You're like, hey, where are you? And I was like, oh, I just woke up. I'm on my way. So we're recording this at what, like noon? What time is it?
12:19.
Yeah.
I didn't even travel, and I didn't go to bed until like 2:30 either.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of part of the life of covering an NFL team. And, when you have an away game on primetime football, which good teams usually do, and that's always the goal. Like, it's exciting, right? But you really do pay for it the next day.
No, you really do. And it's one thing to kind of come off of. What's crazy is I feel like every primetime game outside of maybe the Bucks game, I've had a similar feeling of like, oh, I'm just like dragging the next day. And maybe even the Philly game, like that game, because it was such a like climactic moment and ending. But like, and then the Bucks game was so climactic, but like the last two of the Monday night game against the Raiders, and then even though they won that game, it feeling like a loss, and then this one, which was a loss, that was just like, I mean, we'll talk about it all, but it was one of those like dagger type of moments, and I think I personally am feeling the Week 18 grind of where we are.
Well, that's the key, right? Is the Philadelphia game, the Tampa game came early in the season. Mm-hmm. Things were going well, and you're right, they ended on such highs, obviously for the Falcons, but just in general, like the end of the game. Yeah. If you're a Washington fan, like that was an amazing game for you, understandably, but it's almost like part of the reason why I think The Hangover did so well in movie theaters, and I was actually working in a movie theater when that happened. It was the longest I'd ever seen a movie just be in theaters, I swear, for like half the year it was playing. And I think it's because the end credits scene where they actually get kind of the camera from the night and they're going through the pictures and it's a big reveal for the audience of like what actually happened is maybe the funniest moment in the funniest movie of that year. And it's like, you're ending on such a high. You walk out of the theater being like, wow, that was a great movie. Yeah. I love that thing. It's kind of like the same thing for these games. Unfortunately, the last two, one did go the Falcons' favor, but again, it felt like a loss. And then the one last night was actually a loss.
Yeah, it was a tough game too, because it was definitely like a what if game, like what could have been game. And I think that there was at every turn within those four quarters and then overtime, I felt like the Falcons had a chance. And you have to give credit where credit is due. They fought back. Yeah. But not enough. And I just have a hard time kind of grappling with even the decisions that were made. And I know we're going to talk about like not calling a timeout.
Let's just start right there.
You go ahead. You set us up, Will, since I'm just jibber jabbering, just yapping.
No, that's the vibe today. Yeah. But yeah, so they lost 30-24, and honestly, like that sounds about right. If you had told me going into the game on Friday or whatever, hey, this is going to be a 30-24 game, it's going to go into overtime, I'd say, yeah, that sounds about right. You're probably going to get a really exciting, fun game between two rookie quarterbacks and two teams that I do think are pretty similar and obviously have some similar styles. It's just the way that the game actually played itself out that I think has left fans with a bitter taste in their mouth. Certainly the team did not want the outcome that it got. Yeah. And let's, go ahead and just start with some of the operational miscues. Yeah. You wrote a piece after the game on AtlantaFalcons.com detailing what Raheem Morris had to say about keeping a lot of timeouts in his back pocket. What do you say to you?
Yeah, so I think that I know everybody's talking about the end of regulation moment where it's first down, there's about 40 seconds left in the game. The Falcons, it's tied. They have a chance to go down and kick a field goal and win the game, which would be a huge boon for where they are as an organization, but also where they need to be in terms of NFC South standings. Yep. And knowing at that time that the Bucks did defeat the Panthers pretty handily.
Dominated the Panthers.
The Panthers pretty handily, that you needed that win. point blank period. And in order to keep kind of the ball in your court and destiny in your own hands and all of those phrases. And what ended up happening is Michael Penix throws it down the sideline to Darnell Mooney for a 25-yard gain. And I know I'm just like reiterating this. I'm sure all of y'all saw it. And Darnell goes down. He doesn't get out of bounds. The clock continues to run.
33 seconds, I think, at that moment.
Yeah, 33 seconds from the time that he was ruled down. And then from that point on, 16 seconds went off the clock until the Falcons finally snapped the ball on the next play with 17 seconds left. The Falcons had 2 timeouts at that point in time. And then what transpired after that is like an incompletion. And then the Falcons were gifted a defensive pass interference call and put them, long field goal range, but in field goal range. And then Riley Patterson didn't have enough leg to get it there. And then you go to overtime, and then we saw what happened in overtime. And I think not the fact that there were 2 timeouts and that much time ticked off the clock was just I was sitting in the press box just kind of being like, come on.
You gonna do it?
Right. Yeah. It was a weird sensation because I was like, why are you not? Why? And after the game, Raheem Morris was asked, why didn't you do it? And his response was that he thought the operation from the point of Darnell giving the ball back to the ref, putting the ball down, and snapping the ball, that operation was going to go quicker. Mm-hmm. But I've gone back and watched it, and I don't know if I feel like the coaching staff and potentially the team, the offense was on 2 separate pages because it didn't feel like the team on the field was preparing to quick snap it.
Yeah. And the urgency, they weren't showing that level.
Right.
Get up there, get up there, get up there.
Yeah, it didn't feel like at the end of that Tampa game where they were able to clock it with a second left. It didn't feel like that sense of urgency.
Or New Orleans.
Or New Orleans, that's right, yeah. It didn't feel like that sense of urgency. And so that's why I kind of was just waiting for, are you going to, when are you going to do it? When are you going to do it?
I think that's the frustrating part is that we've seen them do it before.
Right.
And when some of the best, I think, color analysts in the game are really good in these moments because they're kind of breaking down how teams should be thinking about it. Yeah. And when you kind of get under 40 seconds or so, you should probably start thinking in terms of plays, not seconds.
Right.
Right? How many plays can we get out of this? And when you let 17 seconds go off the clock, that's
2
almost
or 3
plays. Yeah. And so when you're talking about the defense pass interference call, that's an amazing gift, but there's only 2 seconds left on the clock at that point.
Right.
You don't have any other option but to bring out Riley Patterson for a 56-yard kick. And if you had 9 seconds, that's maybe 2 more shots to get you a little bit closer.
Right.
And my big thing is, yes, I kind of understand, and these aren't excuses. I'm just kind of thinking about what the benefit of maybe having those timeouts would be. Mm-hmm. It could allow you to keep more options in the playbook open, right? You can use the middle of the field. You could potentially run the ball if need be. Let's say something goes wrong, you need to burn a timeout because Michael Penix drops a snap or there's a sack, what have you. But again, we've seen them do it before, and when you have a rookie quarterback in a spot like that, how many times in college do we see Kirby Smart take a timeout, call the quarterback over, put his hand on his helmet, be like, all right, here's what we're going to do. Yeah. We're going to walk you through it. And I would have just liked to see maybe that situation play out.
That singular point was, I think, the biggest issue that I had. This is Michael Penix's second start.
Don't put it all on him.
Don't put it all on him. He just did what he needed to do to tie the game up. And the fact that to put him in that position in his second start, not only that, but then to not help him out. That was my whole thing. It didn't feel like they were helping him out in that moment.
And I don't think it's all Raheem, right? Because
no, I don't
Raheem
either.
has a staff that is supporting him as well, and he is getting input from guys up in the box, people whose job is on game day. All right, here's the situation, and they run kind of that control of the situation, and so he's got to trust. But at the end of the day, you are the head coach, and I think you need to have a little bit of that wherewithal to say, look, I'm going to take ownership of this moment. We're going to call a timeout. Let's get it all settled and kind of go about it from
Especially when that much time ran off the clock. You know, if we're talking about 7 seconds, I'm probably not saying anything.
Yep.
If we're talking about 10 seconds, I'm a little more hesitant, but I'm maybe not saying anything. It's the 16 seconds from 33 seconds to 17 seconds, and also the fact that this was not the first time in this game that this situation transpired. And what I mean by that is you go back to the end of the first half, and very similar situation. The Falcons are driving. Michael Penix hits Darnell Mooney down the sideline for a 12-yard gain. I believe at that time there was about 40 seconds
it literally,
left.
I think it was like 40 to like
to
21 or
yeah.
so. Yeah.
It was almost a full 20 seconds.
And the broadcasters were kind of like, man, there's a lot of time coming off this clock right now.
The Falcons had all 3 timeouts in that moment. Like, you can't take timeouts with you. You can't wake up this morning and be like, ooh.
Can't take it with you when you're gone.
Right. Yeah. And so that's also what's so frustrating. Is like, why not use them? They're there for your benefit. They're there for your strategy. They're there to help you and give you a cushion. Why make things harder than they have to be? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. And I don't understand it. And I know that Raheem Morris was asked about both of those moments, and I know he said, hindsight, you think about things in hindsight. You had the luxury of hindsight, and maybe should have called, probably could have called was the term that he used. Probably could have called a timeout especially in the fourth quarter, but also in that second quarter. And I just kind of am sitting there like, yeah. Like, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, because I, as a watcher of the game, as a person who studies this game, has been around the game for a long time, and I feel like I have a good, solid knowledge of it, I don't get it. And I think that's fair to say that I don't get it.
It's 100% fair. And I mean, I think there are some people who had actually mixed reactions, I think, to his response after the game. Yeah. Some people liked it because they felt he was being honest, and I agree with that. I think he was being honest, and it's hard to... The last thing I would want to do is sit up there and be like, yeah, maybe we got it wrong, you know? But I do think that Raheem has always said you learn a lesson in wins and losses, and you have to move forward. And I think seeing how if this moment arises again, and unfortunately it probably won't be during the 2024 season, it may be in the future, but we need to keep this in our back pocket and remember this and see how they handle it next time, because then I think it becomes maybe a little more magnified of like, if you make the same mistakes a couple of times, all right, then that isn't showing the growth and learning that you yourself purport to really want and seek out. Yeah. But I kind of, in my mind, was justifying the first half one a little bit because you didn't want to give Washington one other opportunity with the ball. So I maybe kind of, but you had three timeouts. 3 is tough.
I know. Right? That's my thing is like 3.
3 is tough.
3 is tough. And that's the thing, because I was in agreement with you. I was like, okay,
you're around a minute.
Yeah.
All right, let's get this thing down but then to come away with only a field goal instead of really having another shot or two in the end zone was,
And maybe a bit more like manageable shots in the end zone, because I think Michael Penix did have Drake London kind of on that final third down route before they sent out the kicking unit, and he just overshot him. And I think you have that moment, things feel different. You don't talk about like 3 timeouts, not using them, but you have to talk about what happened in this game. And the fact of the matter is the Falcons took 5 timeouts with them to the end.
Yeah. In a game where it was tied coming down to the final seconds when they had the ball. It's like, again, these were situational moments where they were in possession of the football and only ultimately came away with 3 points. Yeah. Right? And in a game where it went to overtime and you lost in overtime, that's really tough. Yeah. And again, it's easy to play hindsight, but I think the reason a lot of people are sticking with this is in the moment, it felt like, hey, here's what you should do.
Right, yeah. And I to your point, you hope that they transition to like learning from this and everything. Maybe next time out, Michael Penix is operating the operation in that moment at a quicker pace. Maybe he's not relying. I don't know. I just can't look at what happened and be like, oh, they didn't think that they were going to call a timeout. Like, that was what was so crazy is like it didn't, to me, and I've watched it, God, so many times. Yeah. And I don't get it. I don't get it.
I just think even keeping the possibility of Bijan Robinson in play a little bit, right? Like, again, you have those 3 timeouts. Leave a little more time on the clock to give it to Bijan 1 or 2 times. Like, see what can happen, get a little closer, and again.
And I know that, like, this is a team that has been very, like, I think gutsy in like going forward on 4th down and everything. But I think there's a difference in being gutsy and like playing to strategy. And
you don't always have to thread the needle.
Yeah,
right?
like those two things can be the same, but they can also be incredibly separate, and one doesn't go with the other sometimes. And I think this is a moment where I didn't think you needed to be gutsy.
Yeah.
I think you could have been conservative. You should have been conservative, and you should have helped your guys out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Let's start a little bit, or let's continue talking about kind of where the game flipped. And Atlanta could have honestly continued to put their foot on the Commanders' throats coming right out of halftime.
Yep.
Right? They were in a position to force the 3-and-out. They had Washington backed up to like their 18-yard line or whatever.
Yeah.
Couple of sacks. Like everything was really rolling, and it felt like the crowd was about to be totally out of it again.
Yeah.
And really the game could have gone in Atlanta's favor, and the script kind of could have gone out the window for Washington if you're able to force that 3-and-out, get the ball back, maybe add some more points. Like,
especially because Atlanta was running the ball so well.
Really? Yes, exactly.
And Washington really couldn't do that much of anything against Bijan or Tyler.
You love to talk about the middle eight, right?
Really do.
Atlanta could have owned and dominated the middle eight in this game, and I think they would have ultimately emerged with a win had they done so. Instead, you get a penalty on D'Angelo Malone. It's 5 yards, but ultimately the bigger deal is you get a new first down.
Yeah.
And Washington never looked back from there. They put together just like the longest drives I think I've ever seen teams do back-to-back.
Yeah, 15 drives that first one, or 15 plays that first one, 14 plays the next one. Over 7 minutes and 40 seconds in the first one, and I believe over 7 minutes in the second one.
It was like 26 plays to 3 plays in the third quarter, and that's where everything just turned for Atlanta.
Yeah.
I mean, did it watching on television? Like I felt that, but how did it feel in the stadium?
Oh, it was there after they got the 3-and-out. After Atlanta went 3-and-out, following the 15 play 7.5 minute drive that started the third quarter. After that, and Washington got the ball back. And they were just kind of like picking off these kind of not even chunk plays, but just kind of consistently moving the ball 3,
6
4.
yards,
Yeah, like they weren't having these huge explosives.
Going for it on fourth down, like the Jeremy McNichols one where it was like, D, just grab him and suplex him. Just like, don't. And then to start the fourth quarter with the touchdown score to end that drive. And
it was just... I've had this conversation before with people because I feel like people are split on the idea of momentum. And I used to have my sports editor when I was in college at the Red and Black. It was this huge thing because he said that he didn't believe in momentum and didn't believe it was a thing. And I'm a full believer in momentum. I don't, as a former athlete myself, not really that great of an athlete, but as a former athlete myself and having been around the game for so long, you can't convince me that momentum is not a thing. You cannot convince me. It is this intangible thing that shifts games, and it shifts the way you feel about games. And I have, in so many years of doing this, the absolute shift in momentum in that third quarter was as palpable as I think I've ever felt. Because it was, to your point, everything was good for Atlanta. And then it just went.
Yep.
And it was funny because Will and I, during the game, we always are kind of like talking on Slack, like, hey, what are you thinking? And you asked me like what I was thinking about writing after the game. And I was like, well, if this third quarter holds, this to me is a good time to kind of compare a broader picture of where Atlanta is organizationally in 2024 to this game.
Yeah.
And what I meant by that was that the Falcons had one of the best Octobers I've seen from a Falcons team in a very, very long time. They were very dominant. Were playing really, really good football. Kirk Cousins was leading this team to heights that, I mean, heck, we hadn't seen since the Matt Ryan years.
Yeah, hot out of the gates.
And momentum was firmly in their grasp, in their hands.
Winning close games, making game-winning plays. They don't blink, all of that.
It was the whole thing. You have a you're leading the division 4-1. You have a 6-3 overall record. You're feeling so good about where you are at that point in time in the season, and then just the wheels fell off and momentum swung. And when it swung hard back the other way. And then you go on this significant losing streak. And I was kind of like, the juxtaposition of this game was that the Falcons felt in such control of the game in that first half. I mean,
17-7 going into halftime.
Yeah, and they were, like what I was saying, they were running the ball well. Washington did not have an answer for Bijan Robinson.
No.
And simultaneously, the Falcons' defense was doing a heck of a great job stopping the run for Washington. And then you pick off Jaden Daniels, which that doesn't happen very often in this 2024 season.
On a beautiful disguised play. Like, you could tell the pressure was making him throw quickly and not necessarily see everything that was happening. Yeah,
and then you go down and you score off of that, and you go into halftime feeling really, really good if you're the Falcons. And then again, momentum swings, and when it swings so hard. And they tried to get it back. And I think that's kind of similar to what we've seen in the back half of the season. They tried to get it back a little bit. You had some things kind of swing your way. The Dallas beat the Bucks, and you get back in the lead. And it was just like, it was this game was a microcosm of.
That to me was like that last drive in the fourth quarter. All right, you tied it back up. Cool, you did it. Let's go into overtime. And then this game was the overtime.
Right. It was this game was the microcosm of the season.
It was a metaphor
for me. And I'm just kind of sitting there just being like, what could have been, you know, and it's tough because this team, I thought going into this season, had a lot of potential, and I think we've seen a lot of that potential enacted. I mean, Bijan Robinson has been as advertised.
Yep.
Drake London, Darnell Mooney have been so good for this team, and, you know, even with all the quarterback stuff, like Drake London had his first 1,000-yard receiving season. Bijan Robinson has almost 1,700 yards from scrimmage. Like,
I think he's like 8th all time single season in Falcons history this year. Like, it's the individual parts are kicking butt on this team. Even the defense, 19 sacks, 20 sacks over the last
since
5
the bye
weeks.
Week.
Like,
yes,
that is right there at the top in the NFL. Who would have seen it coming? And again, for that to also correlate with a losing streak, when these guys are really playing well individually, I think that just speaks to how hard it is to win in the NFL. And when you sometimes will hear, you know, think back to the Lions a couple of years ago, right? Dan Campbell's first season, it's like, man, they're showing something here. There's promise. They've got potential. They're almost learning what it takes to win, right? You've got to go through some of these losses. I think what's so frustrating, though, for Falcons fans is that the promise has always been there. And there hasn't been that sense that they are that these losses are almost building up to something better in the future because of that. Maybe each offseason you're chasing this next season.
Right.
And whether that's changing at the quarterback position, changing the head coach, doing something just kind of a little bit radically different to maybe get something for the upcoming year, I kind of think maybe you lose that sense of continuity and building towards and creating the sum of the whole or the whole is greater than the sum of the individual parts.
Right.
And that's kind of where hopefully this year can maybe be like 2015, right? And that was another season in which they started very hot and then they kind of faded down the stretch. But I do think that in some of those losses, ironically, they learned a lot of the key lessons that then fueled them to a really memorable and amazing 2016 season. I'm not saying 2025 is going to be anything like that, but I think that I don't know if 2016 happens the way it does without the finish to 2015 and really having those gut punches and having to look inside yourself and be like, we're not going through that again. But it's just hard to say that when it feels like deja vu for kind of like the 7th season now.
Right. No, and I think it's fair because I think even on our last podcast and with Taryn and Amna that we did on Friday, I said, I was like, the same old Falcons narrative, which has become the narrative that the Falcons are the same team that they always are. I said, I was like, this is a moment going up to Washington and potentially beating a team like the Commanders would be a moment to kind of put that narrative aside for a little bit and to kind of be like, this team in 2024 is different. And unfortunately, we can't say that because we're sitting here 24 hours after, not even 24, 16 hours after a loss that, again, like, should have been a win. And how many times has there been a moment like this where we've sat here on this podcast and said, this team should have won this game. Like, this team should have been better in X, Y, or Z. It's tough and it's frustrating, and especially when things like clock management is and like penalties are, because that's something we talked about in the past. Like, when those are the things that get in the way of a performance, like, and those are the things that you remember, that's what makes it a tougher pill to swallow.
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks when you lose, period.
Yeah, point
just
blank
end
period.
of sentence.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit more understandable when it's one of those, like, tip your hat kind of games. Like, hey, they just went out and beat us, right? Like, that's just going to happen in the NFL because everybody is so dang good. It's way harder to swallow when you're able to point at a few things that you yourself did wrong that you feel like prevented you from being the best version and ultimately then cost you a win. And in a season where it really has come down to one game, right? Like, there are plenty of instances throughout the year where you could say if this had gone a little bit differently, right? And that's always going to be true, but it just feels more magnified this year. So let's talk really quickly about kind of where things stand going into Week 18. It's not the most fun topic in the world. Tampa Bay is right back on top in the NFC South after, finally getting right back there. You gave it right back. Yeah. And they will have a matchup with the New Orleans Saints. Falcons fans are now in a weird situation of having to root for the Saints, which
really hoping the fighting Spencer Rattlers to like really get the job done.
It's icky, but it's the good kind of ick, I guess.
Is it?
No, it's not. It never is. But the Falcons have the Carolina Panthers, who they beat once this season. They are licking their wounds, as cats love to do, after coming off a huge. Yeah, you like that one.
Cats love to do. That was a crazy.
There you go. Yeah, I know, right? It's no sleep at all. But yeah, I don't know what to expect from Carolina because they've been a little feisty.
I don't either. Yeah.
So like this isn't going to necessarily be a walkover, and honestly, I wouldn't be shocked emotionally. Like, what does the team have left in their tank? So, in your mind, like, it's a real long shot, I think, for Atlanta to reach the playoffs at this point.
Right.
Do you even want to try to sell me on the fact that it could happen?
I mean, I think it could, but the fact of the matter is that, like, I'm not necessarily worried about the Falcons not showing up against the Panthers. I think they will, because I think that they have the right guys in the locker room that care about wins. Like, Drake London in the locker room on literally last night, he breaks 1,000 yards receiving for the first time in his career, and I'm not going to say what he actually said because I don't know if I can cuss on this podcast. But essentially, he was like, that's irrelevant as bleep. Like, and there are competitors. Grady Jarrett Grady Jarrett is not the type of person who's going to sit there and be like, yeah, we're just going to pull back a little bit. Jesse Bates is not that type of person. Justin Simmons is not that type of person. Like, the leaders on this team are not, I don't think they have the makeup to just kind of be like, all right, bye. Like, we're going into the off season. Thanks for a good 2024. It was fun for a little while.
Calling my travel agent on the way home from the stadium, right?
Like, I don't think that this locker room is made up like that. So I do think that the Falcons will show up at home against the Panthers and at least give it to them a little bit. I mean, I think if you can show me a dominant performance, I'm like, all right, cool. But it all depends upon the Saints. And that's
and more importantly, the Bucs, who are playing really well right now.
Like, they have, they're healthy. And that was another thing is, the Falcons caught the Bucs at a really strange time in their 2024 season where they didn't have Chris Godwin, didn't have Mike Evans.
And little time to adjust to that.
And little time to adjust.
They hadn't gotten Jalen McMillan going.
Right.
They hadn't gotten, backup tight ends involved.
Cade Otton. It was like the Falcons
Bucky
game was...
Irving wasn't really a thing yet.
No, yeah. And so I think, this team is fun. The Bucs they're fundamentally different now than they were back in October. And I don't see how the Saints win that game, if I'm being completely honest. And that's what's gonna suck if you're the Falcons is I think the Falcons will go out and beat the Panthers. I think they should. I think they will. I think that even though the Panthers are playing better ball of late in the last month of the season, and they're a different team with a different quarterback than the Falcons faced the first time around, I still think the Falcons should win that game. And what
They should.
And what I think is going to be very interesting is like both of those games are happening simultaneously, and we'll know simultaneously one way or the other. Yep. And I could so see it happening where the Falcons beat the Panthers and the Bucs just absolutely destroy the Saints.
Yeah, I see a world where it's
that's if I'm putting odds on it, I'm putting 80% of odds on that happening.
Yeah, and I don't think you're far right. Like currently, the playoff odds are like 16% for Atlanta. Like that is the number. It's like, all right, here's kind of what we think will happen in that Tampa New Orleans game, because again, I trust Atlanta to handle their business because they're the better team than Carolina. This one's at home. They've already beaten them on the road.
Yeah,
I just could see a world where it's late second quarter, early third quarter, 17-3 Atlanta, and you look up and it's 27-7 Tampa.
Yeah.
Right? And you're just kind of like, all right, well, looks like these are the last 2 quarters we've got.
Exactly. And that's such a terrible position to be in. And I feel like it's what's been the reality of the NFC South for the last few years. Like a lot of the last 3 seasons, it really has come down to the week 16, 17, 18 slate.
Yep.
And it's so frustrating because it didn't need to be that way.
And it's come down to that without it being within their control.
Exactly.
It's come down to it.
They haven't played that many NFC South opponents since after the bye week. That's the thing is they played all of their NFC South opponents before you ever got to the bye.
Yeah. This will be the next one.
Yes. And it's just it's just so oh my gosh.
It was New Orleans in a game that, and this may actually be our question of the week this week. If you could have one more shot at a game already played.
Yeah.
Like if you could redo one game on the Falcons schedule, what would it be? And New Orleans would be high up on my list.
Yeah.
I like if you play that game 10 times, I think Atlanta wins 8,
I do
9
too.
of them.
If Younghoe Koo makes one more field goal,
exactly.
That game could have gone any which way or direction. And I agree with you that if you go back and you redo that game, you feel differently. I also think if I'm going back through it, and I'm thinking about the games that I felt that Denver game right before the bye week.
Yeah, gross.
That was a really tough one. If you could have at least put a better performance together in that game. Now, granted, I know they were extremely beat up in the secondary and allowed Bo Nix to just go off.
Denver seemed like they were just a buzzsaw in that game.
Yeah.
Almost I kind of don't know what you could have done. Maybe getting guys healthy, maybe having your guys on the back end, but
that one was really tough. And then this one against Washington, that to not have, or even the Chargers game,
Chargers game is another great one.
Chargers game is the one that I felt the wheels are falling off a little bit, and that was the game that Kirk Cousins threw 4 interceptions. I don't know, man. I don't know. We could go all day with that answer or that question.
I want to try to, and fans may kill me for this, try to pull us out of the muck a little bit. And before we get out of here, just highlight a couple of things maybe that stood out to us on a positive note, right? I think A.J. Terrell, I tweeted this out after the game. Next Gen Stats had an amazing stat. He covered Terry McLaurin on 94% of his routes.
Yeah.
Gave up or allowed 1.2 yards of separation on the targets. 7 targets, 1 catch allowed, 5 yards. He took their number 1 receiver, a player who came into the game second in the NFL in touchdown catches. Nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
Nowhere to be seen. They have a missing persons alert out for Terry McLaurin in Washington right now because of A.J. Terrell, and he has been doing that
all year
against Justin Jefferson, against CeeDee Lamb, against the best players in the NFL.
I don't know if A.J. Terrell will be an All-Pro this year. I don't know if he'll...
But he's played like it.
But he has played like it. I don't know if he'll get a Pro Bowl nod, but he has played like it.
Better get a Pro Bowl nod.
It is really... corner is such a fascinating position, and this is something that I asked Raheem about 2 weeks ago.
I think that's why they're all crazy.
I know. You have to be. You have to be crazy to play that position because you're on an island so much, and your mistakes are amplified tenfold.
But nobody notices the things you're doing well.
Exactly, because then the ball doesn't get thrown your way, so the ball's completely on the opposite side of the field, and you're just cool.
Yeah.
I did my job.
You have to earn that emeritus status, and then you get 3 years of being just Darrelle Revis or Nnamdi Asomugha or Patrick Peterson, where you can even have a bad year, but people are just going to pencil you in because you're just a name brand.
Yeah.
but like you have to break into that echelon. And AJ,
I don't know why
as
he
close
hasn't.
I think as you can be. Right?
I don't know why he hasn't, especially after the 2021 year that he had.
I think it's because there was a couple of years there where he dipped back to the pack, but this year's been like as good, if not better, than that 2021.
I know.
year.
I would put it up there with that 2021 season.
He's got 2 picks. Like, he's played really well.
I don't understand why more people aren't talking about him, like point blank period. And I know we're around it all the time and we watch all 22, and so we actually have the opportunity to really truly zero in on what he's doing. I just hope that other, like, when it comes to like all pro voting and Pro Bowl voting, and like when coaches and players of opposing teams are like,
I think he'll get the respect there.
That's what I hope, because I don't know if he's getting as much respect as I feel like he has warranted in his play this year from the national scope of like NFL fan bases.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, because he's playing at a really, really high level, and he's playing up to the contract that the Falcons gave him at the start of the season.
Yep, 100%. Again, the pass rush really has been a standout too, but Bijan Robinson on the other side of the ball, like, what more can you say? He is just so much fun to watch.
He is. It's funny because my dad texted me like after, I think it was either the second or third Falcons drive, and it just said, I tweeted this, but it was like, he just said, Bijan Robinson's really good.
He's a good football player.
Really good football player. Like, I love watching Bijan Robinson play, and every single time it's funny going to other press boxes and hearing from other reporters who cover like the opposing team, and hearing kind of defensive coordinators and defenders talk about Bijan Robinson. Yeah. Because I think I think people can watch him on film and be like, oh, like he's been doing all these moves and he's really cool and he's super slimy and he's super quick and like he's just,
I love that.
Like he's such a fun like talent, and he has this feel for the game. I've talk about it all the time. He has a feel for the game that I've never seen from anyone before. And he has a vision that I've never seen from anybody before. He's one of one. I truly believe that. And hearing the like ooh or the ahs of other people watching Bijan who don't get to see him on a day-to-day basis is a lot of fun. Because it kind of reaffirms that like, no, what you're seeing is not normal. What Bijan Robinson is doing, how he's looking at the game, how he's feeling and reading it is not normal. It's a gift.
He's the type of player, and this is like the highest compliment I think I could pay anything, is like he makes me want to immediately just start like writing about him. Like I just want to start describing what I'm seeing and use the most colorful language, and like I just want to talk about him. And I think that's what you're getting at, is like people just when they see it, they're like, are you seeing this?
No.
Look at this.
That's exactly what it is. It's like every single time he does something, everybody's like, hey, man.
Yeah, like tap you on your shoulder, like a stranger you've never met. It's like when somebody scores a touchdown, you turn to like the person you've just been sitting next to all game and you have not talked to once, and you're like, high five, let's go.
You're like, you saw that, right? And you're like, I paid to
now
be
let's
here.
go back to ignoring each other and watching the same exact game.
We're never going to speak again.
We never obviously watched like Walter Payton play, but he's like the player that I keep kind of thinking about when they're like sweetness. Just he was so smooth and could glide and he's flowing, and it's like that to me is Bijan Robinson, and it's again such a joy to watch him, but it's a shame that we're not going to see him in the postseason potentially, right? Again, everything still a big asterisk, but you know, it's just he's so good. He's such a good player. It would be so much fun to see him on that stage.
And that's the thing, is like there are so many guys who I think are playing at Pro Bowl levels and all pro levels that maybe aren't going to become those because the team hasn't won games. And that's a shame.
It is a shame.
And it goes back to the point that we were originally making off the top about how there are individual pieces of this team that are playing really, really good ball. Yeah. But like for some reason, it's not coming together in wins. And that's what's so unfortunate about this team.
And it's what the team will have to tackle. And if they don't ultimately make the postseason, they'll have an offseason to think about, all right, how do we take that next step? How do we bring, again, these individual pieces and make the sum as great as it can be? But you're a Pro Bowl podcaster.
Thank you. I
appreciate it. So thank you for joining me. Thank you all for listening to today's, a little bit of a downer episode. But hey, we're here, rain or shine. And we've got one more of these to go. So be on the lookout for our preview pod coming on Friday. We will talk about the Falcons-Panthers matchup in the regular season finale. And then we'll be around throughout the offseason,
Oh, we will.
We got some draft stuff to talk about. We got some free agency stuff to talk about anytime there's a big major move. So be sure you are liking and subscribing. Make sure you hit those download buttons so that you know every time we've got a new episode. And make sure you check out our YouTube channel, which has incredible content outside of the podcast realm, a ton of video by our amazing Emmy award-winning video team. Check out atlantafalcons.com for all the excellent written coverage and some incredible photos as well. So for Tori McElhaney, I'm Will McFadden. It's been Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. We will see you guys next time. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's.